Good morning and welcome back to DOGTv channel 13.
In other news today, Shakopee Online 4th graders are celebrating National Pizza Day today by having a virtual lunch at noon. Join in and bring your lunch, pizza if you can, to celebrate together. Go to Google Meet and enter code PIZZA, P-I-Z-Z-A. Yum, pizza! I'll never say no to a slice of that. It's another cold and blustery day today. Let's go to Honey Rose, the weather dog, for the details and forecast.
Looking at the map of the country, you can see that high pressure is over Minnesota. Temperature of only 7 degrees this afternoon. We will dip back down to -8 degrees tonight. Wind chills could be dangerous, so stay warm. Looking ahead, we go back into the deep freeze this weekend with the temperature of -12 on Saturday and -13 on Sunday. There is no chance of precipitation for the next 7 days.
Have a great day, Shakopee Online 4th graders.
Wow, Honey Rose the weather dog has a lot of information to share with you. In our books, it was on page 260. Many of you have read this together already, or you have an idea at least by looking at some of the notes that were taken about it. But we're going to highlight just a couple things with Honey Rose. And of course, to look at the beginning, we need to understand what is weather. It says here, up in the air. Quick, describe today's weather. Is it cold and windy, warm and dry? Many things you do depend on the weather. But what is weather? Well, you see this yellow highlighted word in this paragraph right here. So let's take a quick look and read together. It says the atmosphere is a mixture of gases. It is mostly made up of nitrogen and oxygen. The condition of the atmosphere at a given place and time is called weather. Weather takes place in the layer of the atmosphere closest to the Earth's surface. Without the movement of gases in the atmosphere, there would be no weather. So there's a lot of things that we can look at and measure that would describe the weather for that particular day. You see on this page a couple other highlighted words, humidity and air pressure. Those are two things that describe our weather each and every day. There's also, of course, the most basic thing, which is just the temperature. It's not in yellow highlighted, but air temperature is probably the most talked about part of our weather. When people say, well, how hot or how cold is it going to be? That's maybe one of the first things they want to know for their day as they get ready to plan their day on the weather. But humidity is the amount of water vapor that's in the air. When air feels dry, we have low humidity. When the air feels damp or wet, we have high humidity. That goes along with precipitation too, because if it gets so humid and so saturated, it finally falls back to Earth as precipitation. It gets so humid. But there's this other thing called air pressure, and that goes along with the experiment, the barometer that Honey Rose is going to make with you. And it talks about air pressure is the weight of the atmosphere pressing down on Earth's surface. So there actually is pressure coming down from the air above us. Air temperature and humidity both affect air pressure. Changes in air pressure usually bring changes in the weather. So to make your own barometer, it's really quite simple. It's just a matter of having the right things. So you take a cup and you're going to take one of your balloons and you're going to cut the balloon off so that you can stretch it over the cup. So that's the first step. So the bottom of the balloon was cut off, and the top part of the balloon then you take and you stretch over the top of the cup or the glass. You could do it over the top of a plastic cup. I'm taking the glass one just to be a little bit more sturdy. But you take and put that over the glass, and you can see it's fairly tight already, but I'm gonna add this rubber band around it as well, just to hold it in place. So you can see I put a rubber band around the top of this cup to hold the balloon in place. It was really tight anyway. I probably didn't even need to put the rubber band on it, but just kind of keeps it from moving. And then a lot of you have in your materials a pencil, an unsharpened pencil that was given to you by your teacher. A lot of you have at least something around your house maybe that's a pencil that you could use. You could use a pencil, you could use a straw. Actually, you could use a straw as well. But something that you can tape onto the cup. And start in the center somewhere and tape it down. Okay, that's the next step if you can. So there you have your homemade barometer. So it's just a pencil taped to the top of a cup that has a balloon over it. And you can see right now the pencil is taped so that it's sticking straight off the side. All right, we'll place this homemade barometer outside. And if you didn't get a chance to make one because you just can't find supplies around your house, that's okay. Totally okay. You can just look along and follow with what Honey Rose has made here. And she's going to share with you in her lessons how this homemade barometer works. So we're going to go place this outside next. All right, I'm taking this cup. I'm just placing it outside. Does not matter where you put it. I'm just setting it here on my deck. And I'm now going to start to keep track of this. I'm going to look out through the window and see what happens to my homemade barometer. All right. So the barometer that you made, it's a type of tool that's used in weather to measure changes in air pressure. There's lots of different kinds of barometers and styles of barometers, things that measure how much pressure is pushing down. This one is a classic one where the air pressure is pushing down in this mercury, and the mercury is floating up into this tube, and then it's measured at how high it goes. So the air is pressing down, pressing down, pressing down. The mercury goes up, 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 up. The higher the pressure, the higher the mercury is going to go up in the tube. If the air pressure changes and it goes lower and lower, then the mercury is going to go lower and lower. So that helps us understand how a barometer works. We're going to take a look at our barometer and see how our barometer compares to a classic barometer, but there is other kinds as well you need to be aware of. So checking back on my barometer, my pencil didn't even stay on because this got pushed down so far already. If you look at the top of that, look at how much air pressure. It's been pushed in so far, my pencil couldn't even stay stuck on it. That's how high the air pressure was. It's pushing it down in the center. That's high air pressure. Well, we'll check again on another day. Maybe I can get my pencil taped back on to try to show that better. But this is one of those days where there's a lot of air pressure. It's a high pressure pushing down on the top of my barometer. So on this page is talking about the wind, which is another really important part of weather. What direction is the wind blowing, and how fast is the wind blowing? There's a tool that's shown here on bottom page 264, and this tool helps us to measure where the wind is blowing, like what direction is blowing from, and how fast. By spinning this at the top, how fast is that wind blowing? This anemometer, kind of a tricky word there, anemometer, you might want to say that one together. An anemometer pressures or measures wind speed. Wind pressures or pushes against those cups on the anemometer, causing it to spin. The rate at which the cups spin is measured and used to determine wind speed. A wind vane, that's this kind of thing down at the bottom with those metal north, south, east, west, points in the direction from which the wind blows. So it moves according to the wind catching on that and blowing in the direction. Which direction is it blowing? Another thing that a weather person might talk about when they do a weather forecast, or a weather dog in our case, Honey Rose the weather dog, they will talk about clouds. And there's a lot of different kinds of clouds. When those clouds form, they form for different reasons, and they have different effects on our weather, whether it's a cirrus cloud or a stratus cloud or a cumulus cloud. The cumulus ones you have to be kind of careful of. They're the ones that, if they grow high and thick enough, they can develop into stormy cumulonimbus clouds. They're gigantic clouds that kind of mushroom up at the top, and that's when we know we might have some severe weather. And finally, a weather person or Remember that word meteorologist? A meteorologist is that person that studies weather and is a scientist that looks at weather and climate. Well, they might look at, of course, rain when they talk about the weather for that day. The amount of precipitation here in Minnesota right now, it would be snow. If you live somewhere else, it'd be rain. Depends on, the temperatures, of course. But you see another instrument down at the bottom, another tool. This is a rain gauge. And some of you might have these in your own yards. A rain gauge measures rainfall. Rain fills the gauge, and the scale on the side shows how much rain fell. So it's actually just a container, a tube, and as the rain falls in, it starts to fill up the tube, and it is measured in inches on the side. So this is another one. You could make your own weather gauge, or I should say rain gauge, it's called, your own rain gauge, and find out how much rain fell on a particular day. Of course, it doesn't happen now in the month of February here in Minnesota, but in the summer, that would be something you could make really easily. And then you just take a ruler or something and mark along the sides, or just measure the sides and see how much rain fell. It just collects the rain as it falls from the sky. So when you get to page 278, here you have a meteorologist. That's what we were talking about. Honey Rose is playing a meteorologist for our lesson today. Meteorologists use maps to show the current weather and how it will change. What does it take to make a weather map? Well, there's a lot of information on these 2 pages. You see here this map of the United States and how there's cold fronts and warm fronts. It shows where the rain is coming. It talks about snowfall. Sure enough, up here by Chicago, there was some snowfall in this map. So weather maps help us to understand what's going to be happening for that day. All right, for today's assignment, there's going to be a PDF in Canvas. It goes along with some of the pages that are in your science book as well. And this is another way for you to practice and review, and maybe your teacher will assign some of this as well. This page 270 talks about some of those tools, those instruments that are used to measure weather. There's fill in the blank down here at the bottom, and then this word play. Most of these words then you heard today or you've read together as a class. So it's kind of like a crossword puzzle that you can work on. There's also another one of these word play pages back after the section about meteorologists and how they predict weather. So these pages are another possibility for you to practice or review, and maybe your teachers will assign those. But if you would, go on to Canvas, the next button, and there's a short little review that I put together for you to practice and goes along with Honey Rose's lesson.